This is Ron Klopfenstein. Meet me in the hot seat every Monday at 5 p.m. for Hot Seat Media Mondays on 95.5 FM, The Heat. You're in the hot seat on Media Monday. Hey everyone, I'm Ron Klopfenstein. You're in the hot seat on this Media Monday. We want to welcome everyone who's streaming today on Twitch and Facebook Live, as well as the streaming audience at 955theheat.com and on the TuneIn app, as well as those of you who are listening to our broadcast on 95.5 FM. This year, WIBX Radio is celebrating 100 years on the air. We'll talk about them. Two of the journalists who worked at the station in the 80s and 90s, John Stemen and John Swan. The Bill Khan will have a review of Superman. But first, we begin tonight in New Hartford, where volunteers were participating in a wonderful annual event. Photojournalist Jim Hale and I were on the scene. Here's our report. I'm Ron Klopfenstein at Hospice in New Hartford, where people are picking up monarch butterflies in memory of people that they've lost. I'm with Jan, she's the event chair. So Jan, can you tell us what's happening here today?
People have bought butterflies in memory or honor of a loved one, and they're coming here today to pick them up and then release them.
What do you think it's like for people when they release butterflies? Like, why do it?
I think it's very rewarding to them to honor somebody that they care about. I think it helps in their breathing, and it's such a happy, wonderful experience for everybody that participates.
I'm with Giovanna, and she's remembering her grandmother. Who was your grandmother?
My grandmother was Marie Luce.
What was she like?
Oh, she was amazing. She was the best woman I've ever known.
What did you guys do together?
Oh, the best Sunday dinners every Sunday. Me and my cousins, my aunts and uncles would all just go to her house and just spend Sundays together.
So what do you guys plan to do with the butterfly?
We're gonna go to the cemetery and release them at her gravesite, and then we're gonna do a dinner together after.
What do you hear from people that talk about it? Like, you have people that come back to year after year and with these butterflies.
Yes, they just say it's a great way to honor somebody, and they tell us where they take the butterflies to release them. It might be at home. It might be in a special place that their loved one enjoyed. Some people have picnics and do a butterfly release at a picnic or a dinner. And some people even travel and take them to relatives farther away from here. And
what a nice symbolic gesture.
It's in here.
The people I spoke to today said that releasing the butterflies provides closure, which is an important part of the healing process after the death of a loved one. In New Hartford, I'm Ron Klopfenstein, 95.5 FM, The Heat. Superman was the #1 film at the box office this past weekend. Lily Christopher has more.
Hi, everybody. So I'm a big superhero fan, but I still wanting to see the movie, but I watched many clips. Superman swept away the highest grossing number in film. It made $122 million at the American movie theaters this weekend and $217 million in international films. Wow, talk about...
Yeah, wow.
Wow, it looked like you made a couple of dollars there.
Exactly, yeah.
But Superman has become the third highest grossing film this year behind the Minecraft movie and Lilo and Stitch. I love the theme of Superman is a hero that many Americans have forgotten, that Superman once came from outer space and he was an immigrant, and little did they know that this immigrant wasn't from the same planet as everybody else, could literally be like a superhuman and save the world. This immigrant saved lives, saved communities, saved people's health and image. And I just feel people don't realize this wonderful person is immigrant, just like the people right now who are immigrants, just trying to help people and trying to go by with their day.
It's a deeply resonant theme, and Jim Hale, our photojournalist, he went to see the film this past weekend, and
Jim, I know you're something to say about it too. You really enjoyed the movie. So why don't we get Jim the mic there so he can So Jim, why don't you tell us what did you think of Super? It was a deeply resonant film.
It certainly was. And I'd like to say
I'm
thank
gonna
you.
get yourself in the mic there, maybe.
Thank you for having me.
There we go. A super big voice.
Yes, I did thoroughly enjoy it. And I want to thank Nabil for putting together the special event that we went to. And
Yes.
paid prizes. It was fantastic. And it creates a real community with the thing. So here's my takeaway from the movie. No one can define you unless you let them. What truly defines you are your actions, and discovering your authentic self is a journey that can take a lifetime. I think that it will inspire, and I hope it will inspire people to be kind. See kindness as a strength, not as a liability, because that's really what Superman is all about. For me, it was the first Superman movie I think that really genuinely inspired me and gave me hope for our future. So
It was a really stirring film, and you hosted an event on Thursday. It was actually was like kind of the day before the official premiere. So Jim and I and a bunch of your friends, we were lucky enough to see Superman kind of before some of the rest of the country did, and everybody there really we're really moved by the film. It was kind of more than just a kind of like upbeat, rah superhero thing. It really, those themes really spoke to me. How about you? What did you take away from the film?
So I mean, as somebody who runs a comic book store and see kind of the superhero films come and go, this was the first time that in my lifetime where I felt like I was getting a Superman that was comic accurate.
How so?
So, a lot of times with comics, they go run for a long time, and a lot of times though they want you to be able to pick up any comic and just go from there.
Mm-hmm.
And when this movie started, right, we didn't get the origin story. We got Superman mid-fight, mid getting his butt kicked.
True.
And we just kind of went from there.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody complained. Nobody felt like they were lost. We picked up a segment of Superman's story, we ended a segment of his story, and you could just, you didn't really have to know a whole lot going into it. And that's the same way with the comics. Yes, there's an origin story. Yes, you meet characters and things happen. But at the end of the day, when comics started, people could just walk up to a stand, like a pharmacy or something and grab a book and just read. They might not have read.
Yeah,
they might not have
they
read
might have probably
before.
Right. So it definitely is a standalone quality. And I think also, too, it really stands alone a lot more from the other DC films in some ways. Like a lot of the superhero films, DC and Marvel hold, you don't always necessarily have to know the whole universe story, but it helps.
It helps.
With this one, it really did kind of it stood alone.
And another thing about it, too, if you noticed in the past, it doesn't matter if it's DC, Marvel, whoever, they require, large build-up, for characters to need to be in the same place. But the thing is, again, in the comics, these people all occupy the same Earth, same universe, same whatever. And, Superman was there. There was other heroes.
Right.
They didn't make big fanfare about, these other guys being around. It's like,
Right.
hey, we all share the same Earth. Maybe one night Superman's sitting having a deep conversation with his girlfriend. Maybe outside the window there's something crazy happening. And, maybe he didn't need to have some big epiphany to find other heroes. They were there. They can pick up the slack too.
That's true. That's an interesting
in a
point.
Superman movie, he wasn't the only hero.
Yeah. What do you think it says about what do you think that the overwhelming it being a blockbuster? What do you think that says about the film and also about where we are as a culture right now? I sort of came away feeling like he was the hero that we need.
Yeah, and maybe deserve to.
Yeah.
Kind of harkening back to what Jim said, I don't even think people necessarily need to see the movie to want and feel hope. Maybe by the end they felt reaffirmed, but it can't go unsaid that having already surpassed its budget in its opening weekend for a movie that big, people went into it with hope, and they probably walked out of it feeling like it was justified.
Right. And I think one of the surprising things is how incredibly current it seemed.
I felt like I was watching an ice concentration camp. You know, like when we're seeing the pocket universe and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there
How-
definitely was a lot of like allegories
There
between like
certainly was.
the super characters, the metahumans, and all those things, to real life.
Persecution of marginalized groups.
Yeah, or I mean, and even not in just those moments. There were so many things that you could compare in the
many
real world.
things. Yeah.
But yeah,
And that was surprising. How long are these kind of films usually in development? I mean, obviously, there's no way they
Years.
were writing that last month, although it felt like they were.
yeah.
You know?
I mean, definitely several years. Usually, these things take, and I'm sure way technology is getting better, and maybe like the streamlining of like knowing how to film stuff is helping and speeding along the process. But still, it takes time.
Right. And it's kind of incredible how incredibly timely it actually
Yeah,
felt.
very topical.
Does that represent, is that going to be a change because of the James Gunn directing it? Is that like part of his style? Because it seemed like the most in the real world, dealing with real world issues of any DC film I had ever seen.
Mm-hmm. I mean, James Gunn, for anybody that doesn't know, also did like the Guardians of the Galaxy films. So this isn't the first
You
time.
can see the edgy humor, which
Yeah.
was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not his first time dealing with like aliens, right? And in
Right.
fact, in Guardians of the Galaxy, a lot of times it felt like Star Lord, the human, the person that we would most associate with, he was the alien. He
Right.
was the alien out in space, and he was probably the weird one compared to everybody else who we looked at them, oh my god, that's a scary looking alien or something.
Yeah.
They looked at him and felt that way.
Yeah.
And so this isn't the first time James Gunn
It's
dealt
true.
with the themes.
I think maybe it felt so much more real is because it was set on Earth.
That
The
too.
primary villain was like a media tycoon.
Sure.
Was someone who we're familiar with in our culture as villains, and it was something about it like that. It was just really. So why did you decide? You had a special event. You got your friends together. You wanted out the theater. Why Superman? What is the importance in terms of like you as a comic book aficionado scholar all these years? Can you put into words like the importance of Superman in the superhero genre?
So I won't lie. Like I like Superman, but he definitely has not always been my favorite. And some people would call him kind of a Boy Scout sometimes, right?
Well,
Which isn't a bad thing, but
Right. He's earnest.
he is. But you start to see the trailers for this stuff. They tell you that this is a reboot of the DC universe, and with all the previous versions of Superman I've had in my life, I thought to myself, "Wait, this looks like it's different." And I'm sure we say that a lot. And I mean, it was true for the last one. It was probably true for the one before that.
Right.
But the thing was, a lot of those things were, again, not very comic accurate. And just seeing
True.
a lot of the things in this made me say, oh, I would really love to finally see a movie that like looks just like here as it does up there.
Yes.
And I'm happy to say that I feel like that's what I got. And I'm sure that's, what a lot of other people who saw it got.
I think everyone has seen get some money's worth, or feels like
Yeah.
they did. Lily, let me ask you, like, how resonant or how much traction do these films have with people of your generation? Are superhero films like we're talking about them? I think they're cool, but I'm 56. Do people your age like these films?
Definitely. I think people really like these films because they show a lot of American influence and culture, but yet a lot of people like it for the superheroes. Yet a lot of people love these movies by generation based on who's acting, because I use Spider-Man for an example, and I feel it was like the British version. Everybody loved it because it was like Tom Holland, British guy, and Zendaya. I feel our generation loves these movies for the plot and the kind of like the storyline, but I feel it's especially who's acting and where the setting takes place and what age the superhero is supposed to be, because I think a lot of it too goes by the age of the hero at the time. Like some people feel more relatable, but I would have to say my generation, though, they're pretty big watchers with Marvel, especially really all generations, but especially this generation, I would say they're definitely watchers.
So does your generation for like superhero films, are you more likely to relate to a character like Spider-Man who's younger than Iron Man who's like much older? Is that a fact?
Oh yes, I think that's true. I think like Superman and Spider-Man who are younger, and even if they did one on Batman flashing back, a lot of young people try to think like that. Like they're starting out, they want to find a way to make their name go down forever. It's good, and they want to try to carve their path of how they can be successful. So I would definitely say the more the hero falls towards my generation's age bracket, the more people take interest.
It's interesting. It's interesting too, like how some characters, the age is really important part of the characterization too. Like I can't imagine Spider-Man in middle age, but I still can't imagine Iron Man in high school. So how would you describe Superman? Like to you, Nabil, like, you've been reading about him your whole life. How would you describe Superman?
Well, I mean, Superman's got a couple different eras, and I mean, the great thing about kind of like what she said with the relatability based on the age, if you want to like read about when he was like young and Smallville, kind of learning his powers, you read like stuff,
That's true. There
maybe-
was Smallville, so
Yeah.
I guess we did see him in high school.
There were super boy comics, but I mean, it was still
Yeah.
part kind of, it was like
Yeah.
him kind of learning how
I
to.
guess when I see him as young, I guess as Iron Man, but I cannot see as a 20-year-old.
And Tony Stark, I mean, he wasn't,
But he
he wasn't
was
a hero as a
in all
kid,
world. Yeah, right.
Yeah, he became one as an adult. So like as a kid, he was kind of like probably the total opposite. Like
Yeah.
couldn't care less. Wanted to help build up his weapons company.
Now, this was such a blockbuster, defied expectation. It defied the people. I think they were trying to derail it. What do you think impact this will have on these kind of films going forward? Will they be more like political? Will they be more bold, more brave? Will this give them a license to really address more topics that are happening in current events?
I think that DC took a chance with James Gunn because it was his success with Guardians. And those films, were relatively like unknown characters. I mean, like they existed in comics all the way back to the 70s, but if you'd ask a mainstream person who they were before 2014, they'd be like, who?
Right.
I think because of this, James Gunn is going to start putting different characters on the screen that I might not know about, you've never heard of. I mean, they've existed for just as long, and he'll start giving us spotlights to these different characters, and hopefully, it reinvigorates people's interest in these types of things. I mean, Marvel's been doing these movies since 2008, like with their big connected universe,
Right.
and some would argue that some of the projects, are better than others. They're not. There was a time where like everyone was a hit, and now it's probably
Yeah.
like hits.
There's a bit of fatigue, I think,
Sure.
at this point. So
And I would not be shocked if this helped reinvigorate. But the thing is,
I think it might reinvigorate the DC side. I
Yes.
can sort of feel myself being less interested in Marvel because of now it's like, oh, it's James Gunn guy. I'd like to see his take on things.
Marvel may regret letting him go.
I think they probably will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lily, how much does social media influence like what films like your generation sees? Like if you see people talk about it on TikTok, like negative, does that make you like does they have an impact?
Oh, it definitely has an impact because many people will watch clips on. But I always say it's not about I always say it's not about what the director's trying to say. It's about how it's advertised because on TikTok or Instagram, people will share a 30-second reel and someone will react to it or someone will make a TikTok sound and it makes you think, what are they trying to say? I want to see it. So I would have to say today, it's not with social media. Even today with other things, it's social media has a big influence on.
So any kind of buzz is like good for a film because of
Exactly.
awareness. It makes it like curious. So Nabil, before you go, let me ask you, what's up next in the superhero genre of films or comics or?
So we got a little bit of a quiet front for the rest of this year in terms of like films, right? There's not any
Films.
other. Yeah, there's no. Well, that's not true. We do have Fantastic Four.
Oh, that's right. Fantastic Four. Yes.
I almost forgot because Superman's
Yes,
overshadowing everything.
Right.
So Fantastic Four does come out in 2 weeks, and that is Marvel's probably big push for the rest of the year.
It's so funny because now I think of DC as the cool one after seeing Superman. I used to
Well,
think
we've
the
also had
opposite,
also had a couple of Fantastic Fours that weren't so great. So the people
Right,
are
it's-
cautious
yeah.
about it.
It'll be interesting to see what they
Yes.
do with it. They can do something with it. Yes. We've been talking to entertainment correspondent Bill Kahn and Florida journalist Jim Hale about the new blockbuster Superman film. We want you to see Superman, so Hospice Media Monday is giving away a $50 fan gift card. For more information on how you can win this card, go to uticaphoenix.net/Media Monday starting Wednesday. So don't worry now. If you listen to this live on Monday, I haven't put it up yet. We're going to do it Wednesday. We're going to post the show on video and podcast So you know what? If you watch the show on video or listen to podcasts, you get extra entries. You win a $50 Fandango card. You go see Superman for yourself. I know what we're talking about here. It's at uticaphoenix.net/media Monday. When we come back, we'll talk about 100 years of WIBX radio with John Stemen and John Swan. I'm Ron Klopfenstein. You're on the hot seat on the Media Monday. More after the break.
Excuse me?
We're coming back.
Oh, no, after 9.
People tell me that?
Yeah, they don't. It's no rush.
95.5. 95.5. Phoenix Radio. 95.5.
I thought they had Crow after the season. They had some other song.
Media Monday.
Yeah. No more.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the hot seat on this Media Monday. I'm Ron Klopfenstein. WIBX 95 AM News Radio began broadcasting on December 5th, 1925. It was originally owned by Gridley, a radio retailer that was located at 236 Genesee Street in Utica. So they sold the radios and they made the content you could listen to on the radio. So it was like they had all the bases covered there. Since that time, it's become an important source of news in the Mohawk Valley. Today, we're talking to two people who were journalists with WIBX in the 80s and 90s, John Steman and John Swan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there was a time that WIBX had a whole news department, and people went out and gathered stories and edited stories and did a whole news broadcast, right?
Yeah. It was, it was a large radio news operation for its time, for market of the size. We had maybe a half dozen people full-time, and then additional people. We had a lone correspondent, we had someone that covered the valley for us, and those were part-time ringers. Yeah, but this was also, when I arrived there in 1984, the Utica Observer Dispatch and the Daily Press were still operating. So you had Morning Man, you had Baker, you had Rome Sentinel, you had WIBX, and two other AM stations that I can think of also had a couple, or maybe three people who were covering local news. And the WOUR, which was a classic rock station then, had a full, person.
They
who went
had
out.
news too?
They had a news person who went out and covered events.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was a very active journalism landscape locally generally, and WIBX was the largest radio news operation among these.
What happened?
Well,
I mean, to all of it.
It's
the
an
Daily
industry
Press is
wide.
gone and the OD there's not much left.
Yeah, journalism, print journalism, of course, the decline of print journalism,
Yeah.
local community newspapers were well documented nationwide as a terrible thing. How newspapers existed then, or you're out of business, or have consolidated, or just a pale limitation of what they were in terms of local news content. And broadcasting, especially radio, was vulnerable to consolidation and buying and selling at the expense of local content over the decades. So really what you see is an evolution in the industry.
So it seems like, John, I'll bring you into the conversation. So, John Swan, let me ask you first, what time period did you work at WIBX?
1984 to 1996.
John Steman, what time period did you work there?
Pretty similar, 1987 to 1996.
So,
I hired him.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now,
How did you get into it? How did that come about?
whatever he's done, for good or ill,
I love that.
And there's been some L, but hopefully I'll make up for it.
I had an opening in the department, and I don't recall who left, but someone left, and that was the thing. I was the news director then, so I was responsible for this kind of hiring decisions, the staff level. And I wanted someone who wrote. I wanted someone who was not just pardon the expression, a jock, a DJ, a record spinner, someone who had radio experience but didn't have journalism experience.
Oh,
And a lot of the young people who applied back then really had their mind on television, but they knew if they went
I
and
see.
broke into radio first, it was a stepping stone.
Yeah.
John was different. John came from a newspaper background, and he was an excellent writer.
Yeah.
And on the strength of that and his mellifluous tones, his voice, golden throat, both of those, the writing background is key.
What makes someone a good writer with news?
Oh, well, how much time do you have?
Well,
if you think about it, nowadays, most news articles are paragraphs are like 1 or 2 sentences. Most things are very short. In this context, in the modern context, how does someone tell a story in print as a writer with really dealing with people's short attention spans?
Well, it's always been and still is who, what, when, where, why. You have to tell the story. You have to write from the audience's perspective, their interests. You have to find out what's important to people in your audience or prospective audience, be they listeners or viewers or readers, and you have to deliver to them what they are interested in a way that is compelling. The writing doesn't have to be long, turgid sentences. Write in a compact style, especially for radio. You write for the ear,
Yeah.
right?
How is that different?
Their style.
Because I actually asked you because I kind of want to learn myself. Because, I came from like print and then having the show spent about a year. And so on these feature stories, you heard one that
Yes.
I did. It is a different kind of thing that I'm doing. And those stories go on YouTube as videos too. But I do try to make them so that the person hearing only the audio will know what I'm talking about. So it's hard to articulate that. How is it different? Like, how would you say that?
Well, radio and television have similar and overlapping styles when it comes to writing for the ear, because in the beginning, of course, television people came from radio.
Yeah.
Before, when television was in its infancy, all of the people, practically speaking, who became television journalists had worked in radio, especially at the network level. It's very common. So what you're doing is we talked a little bit about content, what you're writing, and why you're writing it, to reach an audience with things that they care about. In radio, you're writing for the ear, which means not only do you use your voice to deliver the story, but also word choices are very important. And you can't write really long sentences. You have to write in a conversational style, the way people speak, in short fragments, in sentence phrases, not necessarily complete sentences with the subject and predicate, as you would in a journalistic, even in a journalistic print style.
Yeah.
Is more formal, although I have to say
Less formal. That's one thing.
that print journalism has, in some ways, morphed, except with really high level stuff, into a more informal style.
Right.
Which is back, again, to what broadcasting really.
Yeah. John's Stemen over there. Was that hard for you when you went from print to radio back then? Like, you adapted your style to make it so that it was for the ear instead of for the eye?
There's definitely an adjustment. I think what I tried to do is, most news stories would have the actuality, which was, the comment you got from one of the people on the news stories, and kind of use them to, if you have to go into more of an explanation, you have to have a lead paragraph, because people are not probably as rapt and attentive when they're listening to the radio. It's just, they're driving their kids to school, or, it's not quite the same.
Oh, right.
In a shower,
Okay.
cat is
Flip
making noise
stations.
with the dog, so you have to
True.
keep that in mind.
Flipping back to see what
Yeah.
Ron Constantine has to say on
Right.
another radio station. Yeah, so you have to make it punchy and just sort of get into the taped comment.
How did you know back then if you were doing that? This is the time before social media.
I looked at my news copy that John Swan had slashed with his editing pen, and then I knew that was a little
And
wordy.
then would the editing be done? Would that be done before it aired or afterwards?
Yeah.
Like would you write a script and give a script to the editor back then? And then they would approve it, then you would record it.
You have to remember that we were writing on very tight deadlines, so
That's what I wondered.
write
Yeah.
things.
Like even back then, I'm sure the deadlines were pretty late.
Right.
So.
We had half-hourly deadlines in morning drive, right? Because it went
Wow.
past top on the hour. And so you're writing multiple versions of the story so that in a 90-minute rotation, you have 3 versions of the story. So the assumption was that no one in morning drive was going to listen
To all
output
3
for longer
seconds.
than 90 minutes.
Oh, yeah,
Right,
right.
Work, whatever, right? So you're writing all 3 stories, and then it's not like there was a formalized editing process where, you would hand in his homework and I would look at it.
Yeah.
But we would do it kind of in real time.
Yeah.
If I heard something or saw something, and maybe I tweaked.
It's like maybe this would take an
And people
hour.
did that for each other too. John
Yeah.
raises a really good point about the actuality, which, sounds like, I don't know why they chose that word in the industry, but that's the word. Think of it as the quote in a story in print, and whenever you want it in radio, just like in TV, to let the source speak and tell the most compelling part of the story in their own voice.
Yeah.
So you would find a way to frame that in radio to get to that. So maybe you would only have a sentence or two, and then the person would speak. One other thing about the formatting and why it's different in radio. John mentioned people's distractions when they listen. They're not just sitting there like in 1940 and staring at the radio. They're doing all these other things. So that made it important often for a key point to be made in the early part of the story. I'm talking about 45 seconds maybe tops.
Yeah.
And then at the end too. Just like you would repeat a URL for a website.
Right.
You would at the beginning, do it at the end. But in radio, you wanted to make the key point like
a key emotional point with a
or a key factual point.
So it's so compelling that people wouldn't tune out.
So that people who joined the story halfway through could pick up the
Could connect there. I see. And how long were the stories back then?
Well, the shortest might be 30 seconds, the longest might be a minute and a half, but the average is really 45 seconds to a minute.
So like what NPR kind of thing?
NPR writes in
Like
a longer format, really. That you would listen to NPR, and they do what radio really does very well, which is to use what's called natural sound.
Right.
Sound.
You sound like when they're interviewing somebody
Right.
down there, you hear
Standing
the
next to the
spoons clank and stuff.
waterfall, right?
Yeah.
You can hear the water rushing, and then the guy you can hear the playing, and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. And that's the way to really put the listener in
Like
place,
you're there.
right? And that goes back to Edward R. Murrow,
Right.
who's been written about a lot lately because
Yeah.
of the Broadway play.
Yeah.
Edward R. Murrow pioneering a lot of these techniques on the rooftops in London during the Blitz, where you can hear the bombs going off, and while he was talking, and he was just doing a first person sort of reportage
Right.
from the field, but he pioneered a lot of those techniques and the way he used the language. Yes.
Yeah. So John, how did you use that in your work when you were doing these stories? Like some of them, I imagine you just wrote and read on the air, but some of you went out there and with tape recorders and you got quotes and stuff. What are some examples when you felt like you really did that? Like you really captured that perfect quote to keep the listeners there, or that where it really engaged you?
That's
What
kind
are
of a
some
tough
stories?
one. I can think of some big fires in the early days where people were talking about what it meant to them. One of the biggest fires of the early years when I was there was the Utica Curling Club burned to the ground. This was probably about 1989 or 88.
It was in West Utica.
And everybody had to be evacuated from their homes. So I was just going around talking to people, getting their
So what do you do? Like you're in this situation, the curling club is burned down. It means a lot to people. It's a traumatic experience, even for the people that aren't really connected to it. They're just standing there to watch it burn down. How do you, as like a reporter, how do you approach people? How do you talk to them, and how do you get them to talk to you?
Generally, it always worked for me to be fairly humble about it. I mean, the movie style of reporter being very aggressive isn't really appropriate in a lot of these situations. So you sort of go up and say, excuse me, but I wondered if you'd mind talking a little bit. I'm sorry for the fact you've been evacuated, and what does it mean to you, and just try to get them to describe their experience and something like that. And the one advantage, by the way, I wanted to say of the actuality is that, when you're a newspaper reporter, you hear a lot of the time, I never said that. But the good thing about the actuality is that, it's pretty clear if it's a touchy story that, they in fact did say that.
Yeah.
You got them on tape. But I think newspaper reporters, I noticed there was a certain point in time when they almost all started carrying like little mini tape recorders.
Oh yeah, I always record stuff with my phone. So it's
Before that, I know from my own experience, I would be in an event. I know a newspaper reporter in particular who would paraphrase quotes and present them as direct quotes.
Oh wow.
He was
That's
just
supposed to be
either
used in
working
that.
from his notes or he was polishing a little bit, and it's not like he changed anything radically, but,
Yeah. But
but
you're not
for
supposed
me,
to
a
do
direct
that. Yeah,
quote is
right.
always like,
Right.
they said this.
Yeah, yeah.
Word for word.
Yeah.
You could leave out and if you want.
Right. Well, yeah, totally. But the quote should be exactly. Yeah.
Right.
All right. We're talking today to WIBX journalists John Steman and John Swan. I have this show online,
Our
both in
community.
video and podcast format on Wednesday at unicaphoenix.net/meeting Monday. You can also win that $50 Fandango card and go see Superman for yourself. I'm Ron Lobson. I'll have more hot seat meeting Monday after the break. This is Ron Lobson. You're in the hot seat on Media Monday. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Next week on the Hot Seat Media Monday, our guest will be musician Lou Altman and motorcyclist David Paul. He's raising money for a good cause. So every cool show is music and motorcycles. I have a report on the Fringe Festival, and Lily and I will both have some video from the Italian Festival. That'll be Monday, July 21st, right here at 95.5 FM, broadcast and streaming. For information on those upcoming shows, any upcoming episodes of the Hot Seat Meeting Monday, as well as show notes, videos, and podcasts of all the past episodes, go to unicaphoenix.net/meeting Monday. Starting Wednesday, you can also win that $50 Fandango gift card. Our guests today are John Steman and John Swan. They were both reporters at WIBX News Radio 950 AM, or is it WIBX 950 AM? I might be saying that wrong. Which will be celebrating 100 years on the air this December. So I was asking you during the break, like, what were some of the significant stories that you covered during your time? And one of them is the Sarah Ann Wood case. What was that like?
The Sarah Ann Wood case was a huge story, its time.
So probably, I guess, for some people that don't know, because I always think people remember everything that did refer younger listeners. She was a girl who disappeared and who was murdered. Did they ever find out if she was murdered or not, or how did it get resolved? I can't remember.
It was a confession, I believe, from the suspect.
But no body.
But yeah, they never found out where.
But it was for people that weren't, here back then, that weren't live back then. It was a huge case that really dominated the news, like in this area for a long time. What was it like when a big, huge case like comes into a news department? What happens?
Well, you get out into the field and try to get as much information. In the early days, people were searching in the Norwich Corners, Litchfield area, trying to find signs of abduction. And then later on, the attention moved up north, where the suspect, who was later charged, Lewis Led, said that he had left Sarah's body, and that went on for quite a while. And in a very brutal winter, was it maybe 94? I think in 94 maybe. So the search was in the Racket Lake area, and basically the suspect was giving false leads, I believe, to the police.
So what do you do as journalists? Like do you when it happens? How do you find out? Does it come over this local? So would it come over the Associated Press, or do you get a police scanner? And then what do you do? You're does the news director back then you couldn't group text? So how would that? How do you guys spring? How did you spring into action back then?
John was actually the news director most of those years, 86 on, so he could talk about it. I was the reporter. I didn't assign stories.
Well, we talked a little bit about the size of the staff back then, and it was really staffed around the clock because there was an overnight guy who did a show.
Yeah.
He's playing jazz and he was talking live overnight AM radio in Utica, if you can imagine. So David myself, obviously. He also had a good relationship with law enforcement. He was all about, he would make what we call the beat calls, on a regular basis. And he all did this, again, around the clock. And a police scanner that was in the newsroom that was always live. We'd always watch and listen to the competition. We read the newspapers. So you had this stream of information, all through the internet, of course. But for breaking news like that, you might get a tip from somebody. You might hear something on Stemen. You might, God forbid, see something or hear something somebody else had gotten scooped and aired it first,
Yeah.
and then you would, as you said, spring into action. So,
Right.
so you have primary sources like that you try to stay in touch with.
So what did you do? Like John Swan, like this happens. Do you think, well, I've got this one reporter who's really good at talking to people like in emotional situations. So maybe send him to talk to the family, maybe as someone who really understands like procedural stuff, or maybe send them to cover the search party, or like, do you think about your reporters like who has certain strengths and assign them certain angles?
Well, in a lot of ways, although we had a large size staff for radio at the time, radio news at the time, it was really a sense of shoestring operation compared to an Observer Dispatch Daily Press, two competing news staffs that they had that numbered in dozens and dozens and dozens of reporters and editors.
Oh,
In our case, it was more shift work.
so
right?
really, it was who was available.
It was who was available, who was on duty, and if something was big enough, you would call someone else in early, or someone would stay late, so that you would have overlapping coverage of something that was as it happened, whether it was a fire or a homicide, or in this case, as John's mentioned, a missing person.
So, John, what do you remember from your coverage, or from coverage of your work at that time, that was particularly challenging, or like how did you approach it?
Sometimes it's just the reaction that you get from people, especially if you covered the Utica County Council. And I don't think things have changed a bit. 30-some years, that there are always competing personalities, just as there are today. Anyone who still follows them can probably think of some people. And just the same thing was happening back in the 80s and 90s, where the challenging thing was you wanted to report what was happening, but if it was negative upon a certain official, you would often hear from them. In fact, there were people we heard from almost every day. Several in particular I can think of who would try to.
Was that Hannah in office then, when you were like?
That was later, that was not night.
I did cover the second.
Yes, we both were there for the second coming.
Susan Eckley was telling us about the phone call she got from Hannah, but
Sue?
WTRA.
Yeah.
He had a lot of concerns and complaints.
Did have many concerns, yeah.
He generally.
So how do you deal with that?
He
Like people are
generally
like,
coming up and he'd yell that he had a term he would always use, a tricky and unfair.
He always used POS a lot too, and not point of sale.
So what did you say? What did you deal? How
Well,
do you
the
deal
one
with
time
that?
that he called me, and I had authored a series of reports on him when he had come back, run first for city controller, before then running for mayor. So he was running for city controller, and it had been obviously almost 20 years since he had been mayor, 15 at least. So I did a series of reports, and I talked to people who were around then, who were pro Hannah and not so pro.
So you had
Hannah.
like both sides.
Yeah, and that series was running, and he called me up and he said POS and other things, and you're running this series about me. And I said, well, Mayor, that you just mentioned that so and so said this and that about you, but that was part one. Did you hear that? He said, no, somebody called me and told me. I said, well, part two is tomorrow. We're going to talk to Bill Smith, who was very much in your corner back in the 70s. And he said, oh. So, it was often he was reacting to what people had told him.
Yeah.
Not always. But he was a very strong personality, and he liked it. It was very Trumpian in a sense, in the way Stephen, the interaction with media and news conferences. Mayor Hannah was like that also in real time, where he would have news conferences or events where he would berate the people who were there covering him and have these.
Did he ever do that to you?
I just mentioned my favorite example.
Like at a news conference?
I don't really recall whether he did or not in a news. I just remember the phone call, which was.
What did you do? Well, like, what did you say?
What do you say? Well, you have to treat an elected official with all due respect.
Like they're normal and stuff.
And you're not there to get into an argument.
Right.
And forth. You're just there to pose a question and hopefully have it answered. And so, my personal technique, but that sort of confrontational style, which just wasn't Mayor Hannah alone.
Well, right, I'm sure there was.
And there are still today.
Yeah.
They want to, for whatever reason, they think attacking the media helps them in their public persona, or it makes a point, or they're legitimately angry about something for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But the trick is not to react.
John, Stemen, let me ask you, was that as prevalent back then, the political technique of attacking the media to like score points?
I think it was done semi-privately for the most part, and except for Hannah. I think Hannah had an hour or two of time he would buy every Sunday on what's now 92.7 FM, where he would just rant and rave, and he would criticize. It was mostly the Observer Dispatch that he criticized. He didn't rip us too
The
often.
Observer
Disgrace, I remember that. Yes.
But for the most part, you didn't hear it as you do today. And today it's become just,
It was kind of unique when he was, there was like a technique that Hannah had. It wasn't really,
Well,
it's
he
done
became
that
nationally
really
famous
for
in
doing
the
that.
1970s. An NBC correspondent, Ed Newman, wrote a couple of books about language and use of language, and he cited one of Hannah's news releases at the time. 60 Minutes came and did a piece on Hannah in the 90s, and so he tapped into a populist sentiment.
Yeah.
And of course, he was a wealthy man.
He was kind of ahead of his time in a way,
He struck a chord
He did,
with the electorate at the time, and also attacking the media tends to be very popular with certain set of the electorate.
Yeah.
he got a lot of national news coverage the first time around, and I wasn't here for that. But the first time he actually started berating Utica, saying that it was a lousy city, that anybody in their right mind wouldn't live here. And I think Harry Reisner, was it? Yeah, someone from 60 Minutes came up and did a story about the mayor who hates his own city. So,
So it must have been interesting to cover him.
Yes.
Let me ask you, things that there's that type of politician, that type of persona is more prevalent now in politics. What's changed now is, like we were talking about, how you had a shoestring budget at the time. You had like about 6 people with stringers. DOD had a full staff. There was so much more people covering news in this area and giving context to news back then that aren't doing it now. So I'm wondering, not just like what effect does it have on the news industry, but what effect does it have on a culture, on a community, when there's so many less people engaged in making the news? Well, you can ask your question too. I'll get that question.
The first thing that occurred to me, I thought of this recently, is as the city budget makes its way through the process, or the county budget, I remember thinking to myself, when we were working in the 80s and 90s in radio, our reporter and the OD and maybe WKTV from time to time, we would go to a committee meeting of the Common Council or the Ways and Means Committee of the Board of Legislators. We were in the meetings where we would go to file a story on that, so you could follow you would know what was going on inside
their richness is lost.
Exactly, and I think that level of reporting now is largely absent.
Right, because there's no one to do it, and there's like no money for it, I suppose, and there's no, just having that many more people, I think, engaged in media and news coverage by nature would give things longer context that we're losing now.
But the big things
what
still get covered, the mayor and the council pass the
Right.
budget in the
But
city,
those
for
little things
example.
really tell the story so you understand the big thing. But what's
But those stories are being told more first person by, for example, the good city council members who are active on social media and they're telling it from their perspective. But you don't have a voice or an observer who is attempting to tell the story in a neutral, non-partisan way.
Right.
I think that piece has gone from a lot of it.
I definitely do too. And Lily, you're someone who's kind of entering the business. She's our intern. She's a senior at Lemoyne, just working for the Stemen too this summer. So, Lily, what question do you have?
Wow, so hard to pick just one. But My biggest question with just starting is, I'm on a radio show, I've written for newspapers, but in 20 years from now, where do you think that the news will be, if that makes sense? Like, if you had to say what the world will shift more towards its podcast, TV, back, more kind of leaning back to paper, what do you think the media will look like? Because I look at how the media used to be all over people 20 years ago, now it's so different. Like, how do you think in another 20 years what the change will be?
2045.
The change is accelerating at a rapid pace, as you mentioned, but studying and seeing what's happened in your own young adult experience in your own lifetime. It's really hard to project forward 20 years and say definitively this is how it's going to be, but I think generally you're going to continue to see this sort of morphing and blurring of lines so that content exists, but content, and this with the rise of the internet is where that began. You put into the hands of the masses, everybody, the ability to publish. And so there are no more gatekeepers, largely. There are still the traditional sources, like you think of network news, where they decide what they're going to cover, and then they cover it and feed it to the audience. But I think what you're going to continue to see is everyone's a publisher. Everyone, in the sense, is a reporter, reporting on either their personal experience or their observed experience of events. And it's going to be really blurry. It's, I think, going to have some positives, of course, because you're going to have this tremendous wealth of points of view. But it may be difficult for people to point to, this is my trusted source.
Right.
This
Right.
is, because,
How will they know who to trust?
and I think, you're seeing vested that you're seeing not just hints of that now, but you're seeing real developments along those lines.
Seems like things get, like, attention spans get smaller and smaller too. Like, most people, I think, that will watch this show, will watch these little clips that I make. They're like less than a minute long, so that they can run on TikTok and stuff. But more people will consume the show, like in those little, and that's actually 40, 50 seconds at the most to take off for the logo and stuff. So it's like, I wonder, like, I keep creating those because that's the content, a form that people want. But I wonder, like, what happens to a country, to a culture where if our attention span gets lower and lower and lower all the time?
Oh, you're answering your own question.
Yeah.
I think about how this, just go back and see how this has developed. The standard length of a broadcast, and this is radio or television, commercially, was 60 seconds. Now, if you actually see or hear a 60-second commercial, it seems interminable.
True.
It seems like the longest, most boring thing ever. And then for a time, for 30-second format, 30 seconds is much more standard. But for a time, they were doing 15-second commercials, and you see those still. But what does it do to the public mind and the culture if you go back long enough and saying that the narrative, the novel, was the primary means of entertainment and, to a certain extent, cultural information that was transmitted
it's TikTok.
career. Right.
Yeah.
Hundreds of pages long.
Right.
And now it's
less than 60
people,
seconds.
you hear this all the time in business and elsewhere. People don't read anymore. Don't write a long report. Don't write a long this or that because you're only going to read a few words.
Well, John, I hate to cut you off. I know you're an author too, so why don't we'll have you back on and talk about your books sometime too. So I'd love to do that, but we're at 6:00, so I got to cut things off here. But our guests today have been John Stemen and John Swan talking about WIBX Radio, and our entertainment correspondent Nabil Khan was here to review Superman. If you'd like to hear the show again, if you want to see the YouTube version of this of that pre-recorded segment that I had and the feature stories, we'll have the videos, podcasts of the show online Wednesday. UnityPhoenix.net/Media Monday. And also win that $50 Fandango gift card. Our sound engineer is Jonathan Brooks. DJ J Easy, he's up next with Easy Ride Home. Jim Hale records the show for YouTube and podcast. Lily Christopher, the associate producer. Nabil Khan is our entertainment correspondent. I'm Ron Klopfenstein. I'll be back next week with another Hot Seat Media Monday. This is Ron Klopfenstein. Meet me in the Hot Seat every Monday at 5 p.m. for Hot Seat Media Mondays on 95.5 FM, The Heat.